At 18, she married a widowed rancher with 3 kids. What happened next surprised everyone. At just 18 years old, Sarah faced a turning point in her life. While others her age dreamed of school, travel, or adventure, her family arranged a marriage to James, a widowed rancher with 3 young children. She didn't know what awaited her, but she stepped into it with a mixture of fear and determination. James was nearly twice her age. His hands were calloused from years of hard labor, and his eyes carried the heaviness of loss. He wasn't cruel, but his silence often felt louder than words. Sarah wondered what it meant to share her life with someone who seemed so far from her world. On their wedding day, she wore a modest white dress her mother had stitched. Guests whispered about her age, some pitying, others doubtful. Sarah smiled through it, though her heart trembled. She knew she was walking into a future she hadn't chosen, but would have to live fully. The ranch stretched for miles, filled with cattle, horses, and fields that seemed endless. For Sarah, raised in town, it was overwhelming. The house felt too big, too quiet, and too foreign. She wondered if she could ever call it home. Each morning began before dawn. Sarah rose with James to tend to the animals. The work was grueling, but she pressed on. Her hands blistered, her muscles ached, but her determination to prove herself grew stronger with each passing day. The children, Emily, Tom, and Jacob, watched her cautiously. Emily, 12, was protective and wary. Tom, 8, was restless and mischievous. Jacob, only 5, missed his mother most of all. Sarah struggled to reach them, unsure how to earn their trust. Meals at the long wooden table were quiet. James focused on his food, the children kept to themselves, and Sarah felt like an outsider in her own home. Loneliness pressed heavily on her chest each night. Yet Sarah carried hope. She believed that kindness, even in small measures, could plant seeds. She began by leaving little notes in Emily's books, mending Jacob's torn clothes, and telling stories to Tom before bed. Slowly, the children softened. Jacob ran to her one morning, clutching her skirt after a nightmare. Sarah held him gently, feeling a bond. That simple act gave her courage to keep trying. Emily remained distant, often cold, but Sarah understood. The girl wasn't unkind, she was grieving. Sarah chose patience, knowing that trust takes time. She offered help, never forcing closeness. James too began to notice Sarah's efforts. She wasn't just a young girl placed into his life. She was working tirelessly to keep the family afloat. Though his words were few, his eyes softened when he looked at her. Days bled into weeks, and Sarah began to adapt. She learned to ride a horse, mend fences, and manage the kitchen. Each new skill gave her confidence, shaping her from a hesitant bride into a capable rancher's partner. The community remained skeptical. Some whispered that she was too young, others that James had been unfair to take a bride so inexperienced. Sarah ignored the gossip, letting her actions speak louder than rumors. One autumn evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Sarah found herself laughing with the children around a fire. For the first time, she felt a spark of belonging. Emily smiled faintly, and that small gesture felt like a breakthrough. Love didn't arrive suddenly, but in quiet moments. James thanking her for fixing a broken gate, Tom asking her to read him another story, Jacob slipping his small hand into hers while walking home. Sarah began to realize that while she hadn't chosen this life, she could choose how to live it. Instead of resentment, she chose commitment. Instead of sorrow, she chose hope. And little by little, her choices reshaped her reality. Emily's walls began to crack. One night, Sarah found her crying over a worn photograph of her mother. Without a word, Sarah sat beside her. Emily leaned into her shoulder, and for the first time, the two shared their grief. That moment changed everything. Emily stopped seeing Sarah as a replacement, and started seeing her as support. The bond they formed grew stronger, built on empathy and understanding. The ranch, once heavy with silence, filled with laughter again. The children teased one another, James smiled more often, and Sarah felt pride in the home they were building together. James, though still reserved, began to share more. One evening, he told Sarah stories of his youth, of struggles and triumph. She listened intently, realizing how much pain he carried and how much strength he had. Respect grew into affection, and affection into love. It wasn't the fiery passion of youthful romance, but a deep, steady love forged through resilience, trust, and shared hardship. Sarah found herself falling in love not just with James but with the life they were building. The land, the animals, the children, the rhythm of ranch living. It became part of her, shaping her identity. With each passing season, she grew strong. Winter tested her with biting cold, spring demanded endless labor, summer brought exhaustion, and autumn filled her with gratitude. Each cycle reminded her of her capacity to endure. The children thrived under her care. Emily grew confident, Tom became more disciplined, and Jacob, once withdrawn, laughed freely. They no longer called her Sarah alone, they called her Mama. Hearing that word for the first time brought tears to her eyes. It was proof that she hadn't just survived this life. She had built a family, and in doing so, she had transformed both herself and those around her. Sarah often reflected on how far she had come. At first she was frightened and unsure, but now she stood tall. She wasn't just James's young bride anymore, she was the backbone of the household, someone who carried love and responsibility in equal measure. The ranch demanded endless work, but Sarah no longer resented it. Each task became a reminder of her strength. Fixing fences, carrying buckets of water, or guiding the children, all of it shaped her into a woman who no longer doubted her worth. The community, once skeptical, began to admire her. Neighbors spoke of her patience, her courage, and her determination. They saw how the children smiled again, how James had softened, and how the ranch flourished. Sarah never sought recognition, but it found her. Invitations to community gatherings arrived, and she was no longer treated as the timid girl who had married too young. She was respected, valued, and included. The greatest transformation, however, happened within herself. Sarah discovered a strength she never knew she had. Her journey taught her that resilience is born when we face what seems impossible and choose not to quit. Emily's bond with Sarah deepened as the years passed. The girl often turned to Sarah for advice, confiding in her about school, friendships, and even dreams for the future. Sarah listened with love, proud to watch her grow. Tom, once restless, began to follow James around the ranch. Under Sarah's gentle guidance, he grew into a responsible boy. He admired her just as much as he admired his father. Jacob, the youngest, clung to Sarah with unconditional love. For him, she was the only mother he truly remembered. He often sat in her lap, asking for stories, his laughter filling the room with joy. James too changed. He began to see Sarah not just as a helper or partner, but as an equal. He shared decisions with her, asked for her opinions, and leaned on her strength. Their bond became unshakable. One evening, as the family gathered around the table, James raised his glass. He thanked Sarah for everything she had done, his voice breaking with emotion. The children joined in, and Sarah realized she was no longer just part of the family, she was its heart. Challenges didn't disappear. Drought threatened their crops one year, illness struck the cattle another, but through each hardship, Sarah's steady presence anchored them all. She reminded them that storms pass, but family endures. At times Sarah missed the carefree youth she never had. Yet when she looked at her family, she knew she had gained something far greater: purpose, love, and belonging. Years later, Emily spoke at a community gathering. She told everyone how Sarah had saved their family, how she had stepped in when hope was lost, and brought light back into their home. Sarah wept quietly, humbled by the words. Tom grew into a hard-working young man, often repeating lessons Sarah had taught him: patience, responsibility, and the value of kindness. He carried her wisdom into everything he did. Jacob, though the youngest, never forgot how Sarah had comforted him as a child. He often told her she was his hero, a reminder that her love had left an indelible mark on his soul. Together, they celebrated milestones, birthdays, harvests. Each event reminded Sarah that family is not something given, but something built, nurtured, and cherished. Over the years, Sarah and James's love deepened. They found comfort in small routines, sitting together on the porch, sharing stories at night, and laughing at the children's antics. Their relationship, once distant and cautious, grew into a partnership of equals. Sarah no longer felt like a young bride fulfilling duty. She felt like a woman deeply loved and deeply respected. The ranch prospered as well. With Sarah's organizational skills and James's labor, they expanded their land, improved their herds, and built a future for the children. Neighbors came to them for advice, admiring how they had turned hardship into harmony. Sarah's quiet strength became a legend in the community. She never saw herself as extraordinary, only as someone who chose not to give up, but others saw her as proof that courage, patience, and love can turn any situation into something beautiful. On quiet nights, Sarah would look at the stars, and think back to the girl she once was. The girl who walked into marriage, scared and uncertain. She realized that girl had grown into someone strong, capable, and fulfilled. James often told her he was grateful. What began as an arrangement had blossomed into true partnership, something even he hadn't expected. His gratitude was deep and genuine, strengthening their bond even further. Sarah's journey wasn't easy, but it taught her that life's challenges can become opportunities if faced with courage. She became living proof that love doesn't always start with passion, it can grow through perseverance. And so the story of the girl who married a widowed rancher at 18 became one of hope. What began in fear ended in love, surprising not only everyone around her but also Sarah herself. As Sarah matured, her role on the ranch expanded. She wasn't just a mother and wife, she became the quiet leader who held everything together. Decisions about crops, livestock and finances often ran through her, and James trusted her judgment completely. The ranch house, once filled with silence, now buzzed with life. Sarah's influence touched every corner: fresh curtains, well-cooked meals, laughter at the dinner table. What had once felt foreign now radiated warmth and love. Emily blossomed into a young woman under Sarah's guidance. She pursued her education with determination, often saying she wanted to make Sarah proud. Sarah encouraged her dreams, assuring her that her future could be anything she wanted. Tom learned discipline through chores and ranch work. Sarah reminded him often that responsibility built character. Those lessons stayed with him, shaping him into a dependable young man admired by the community. Jacob grew with Sarah's love as his foundation. He had faint memories of his biological mother, but Sarah became the figure he leaned on, trusted and adored. For him, she was the very definition of mama. James began to reflect more openly about his past. He admitted his grief had nearly broken him, but Sarah's arrival had saved him from despair. He told her she had brought light back into his life when he thought all was lost. These words touched Sarah deeply. She had once felt like an intruder, but now she realized she was a healer, not just for the children, but for James too. Together, they had mended a broken family. The seasons rolled by, each one bringing new harsh winters challenged their endurance, summers demanded relentless labor, and unpredictable storms tested their resolve. But through every trial Sarah stood firm. When hardships threatened to overwhelm them, Sarah reminded the family of their strength. She often said, "Storms pass, but strong hearts endure." Those words became the family's anchor in tough times. Community members often visited, sometimes to help, sometimes to seek advice. Sarah's quiet wisdom gained her respect far beyond the rank. She became someone others looked up to, a symbol of resilience and grace. As the years passed, Sarah's love for James deepened. It wasn't fiery or dramatic. It was steady, patient, and enduring. Together, they built a love story that grew stronger with each challenge overcome. Their bond was tested during illness. When James fell sick for weeks, Sarah worked tirelessly, caring for him while also managing the ranch. Her devotion reminded everyone that her love was not in words, but in action. James eventually recovered, but he never forgot how Sarah stood by him. He told her she was his greatest blessing, the reason he believed in second chances. Sarah's relationship with Emily reached a beautiful turning point when Emily called her mom in front of others. It was unplanned, natural and sincere. Sarah's heart swelled with joy, knowing the bond was unshakable. Tom grew into a young man admired for his integrity. He often told people that Sarah's lessons were the reason he stayed grounded. He credited her for shaping the man he became. Jacob, still the youngest, grew into a playful, kind-hearted boy. He followed Sarah everywhere and his affection reminded her daily of the gift of motherhood she had been given. Family traditions blossomed, harvest feasts, holiday gatherings, and evenings of storytelling. These moments became the glue that held them all together, filling the ranch with joy year after year. Sarah's confidence grew alongside the family's love. She no longer saw herself as the timid 18-year-old bride. She had become a woman of strength, admired not just within her family but across the community. The ranch prospered, in part because of Sarah's organization. She kept records, balanced needs, and planned ahead. James often said her mind was as strong as her heart, and both were the secret to their success. In quiet moments, Sarah reflected on how far she had come. She realized that what had once seemed like the end of her freedom had become the beginning of her purpose. The children flourished, and Sarah took pride in every achievement. She often reminded them that success was built on resilience and kindness, values she lived by daily. James admired Sarah more with every passing year. What began as an arrangement had become the greatest partnership of his life. He told her often that he couldn't imagine the ranch or their family without her. Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude for the life they had built. It hadn't been easy, but it had been meaningful. Every trial had shaped her, every victory had strengthened her. She began to understand that true love is not always found in a spark, but built through patience, endurance, and trust. Her marriage was proof of that truth. And so, Sarah, once a scared young bride, had become a symbol of strength, resilience, and love. Her story continued to inspire those around her, proving that unexpected paths can lead to the most beautiful destinations. Years passed, and Sarah's influence grew even stronger. She was no longer just seen as James's young wife. She was recognized as the matriarch of the family, and the heart of the ranch. Everyone respected her quiet determination. The children, now older, carried her lessons with them. They spoke of her patience, her guidance, and her love. Sarah realized she had not only raised them, she had shaped their futures. Emily went on to pursue her education, always reminding Sarah that it was her encouragement that gave her courage. Sarah felt immense pride watching the girl blossom into a strong, confident woman. Tom grew into a capable young man, taking on more responsibilities at the ranch. He often said his sense of duty and discipline came from Sarah's teachings. He honored her in everything he did. Jacob remained her constant source of joy. His laughter reminded Sarah of the early days when she struggled to belong. Now his love was a reminder that she had succeeded beyond her wildest hopes. Sarah often reflected on how the family had grown together. The fear and uncertainty that once clouded her heart were gone. In their place stood love, stability, and unshakable unity. She knew the journey hadn't been easy. There were nights of doubt, days of exhaustion, and seasons of struggle, but each trial became part of the foundation of their strength. The ranch thrived, becoming a symbol of hard work and resilience. Neighbors often said it wasn't the land or the cattle that made it special. It was Sarah's spirit. Community members came to her for advice, inspired by her wisdom. She reminded them often that strength is not about never falling but always rising again. James, once distant, now showed his affection openly. He often held Sarah's hand as they walked the fields, grateful for the love that had grown between them. Their marriage, once uncertain, had become a true partnership. They were equals in every sense, partners in work, in love, and in life. Sarah found fulfillment not in grand gestures, but in small, everyday victories. A meal shared, a laugh exchanged, a problem solved together. These were the building blocks of her happiness. She realized love wasn't about fireworks or fairy tales. It was about commitment, kindness, and choosing each other every single day. When the children achieved milestones, graduations, accomplishments, and personal triumphs, Sarah felt her heart swell with pride. Each success was also hers, for she had walked with them every step. Emily once told her, "You gave me back my child." Those words stayed with Sarah forever, a reminder that her love had healed wounds she never thought could mend. Tom credited Sarah for his strength of character, telling her he would pass her lessons down to his own children one day. Sarah smiled, knowing her influence would live on. Jacob never hesitated to tell Sarah he loved her. For him there was no doubt, she was his mother in every way that mattered. Her presence had shaped his entire world. Sarah's life had become a story of transformation. What began as fear had become fulfillment. What started as duty had become destiny. She had once been an uncertain bride, but now she was a woman others looked up to, admired, and respected. Her story had surprised everyone, including herself. Even James often said he never expected such love to grow from their marriage. He told Sarah she had been the greatest gift of his life. Together they built not just a ranch, but a legacy, a living example of resilience, love, and the power of patience. Sarah knew her story wasn't one of fairy tale. It was a story of grit, perseverance, and the quiet power of choosing love every day. She understood now that true family isn't something you find. It's something you build with time, care, and endless effort. Looking back, Sarah no longer saw herself as the scared 18-year-old who walked into an unknown future. She saw herself as a woman who had created something extraordinary, and so her story stood as proof that life's greatest surprises often come from the paths we fear most. At 18, she married a widowed rancher with 3 children, and what happened next truly surprised everyone.